Okay, we've got the recording started. Still letting people in, guys. Bear with us just a few more minutes on that. And then I'll dive in. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to dive in. If you need to get a drink or something, we're going to get a dive in about 12:05. So a few more minutes. Yeah. Getting aspirations for the sale. Yeah, you're gonna have to look at it. It won't let me mute. So that's the button I'm seeing. Not sure what that is.
So,
It wouldn't let me go to that button because it had that pop up.
so you just deny it,
Okay,
basically.
so if I see that, deny it. Sorry, guys, had to check in with my moderator here. All right, got a weird message. All right, 2 more minutes, guys, and I promise we're diving in, just letting people get in here. Sometimes I've done these classes and I get people knocking on the door about 12:04, and then they get mad at me for not waiting. So I'm going to give them until 12:05, and then we'll dive in. Right. And like I said, guys, if you're new to the room, we are just waiting a couple of minutes. We are recording this. I'll talk more about that, about how to get a copy of the video and that sort of thing. After the fact, if you want to share it with your agents, share it with your friends, just keep it on hand to check out in the future. And we're on 1 more minute, guys. Thanks for bearing with us and being patient on some of our colleagues here. So everyone knows I like to be interactive with my classes. So there'll be a couple of points where I stop and ask for questions or stories or something like that. Please feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in. Of course, take your turn around people, but please feel free to do that. And don't forget to unmute when you do. That's something I forget to do all the time. Okay. Almost time, guys. We still, believe it or not, we still got people coming in. Welcome in, everyone. All right, 12:05. So, moderator, if you'll just kind of keep watching for people coming in and make sure they get into through the lobby. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with everyone. Thank you. I want to first thank my wife, Venus, for moderating this thing. Venus, if you could please share my cell phone number and my email address in the chat. Everyone that's involved, there'll be reasons you're going to want to write that down. I've got materials that I can provide you based on the class we're teaching today. If you'll text or email me, I will send those materials to you. I'm not going to sign you up for some auto caller. I'm not going to, try to sell you anything. Although I am going to mention what I do for a living when I send that over. So the worst you have to do is ignore that and you'll get my materials. But hopefully it will help you some if anyone's looking for a good option at closing attorney. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Awesome. Got people from all over the state in here of North Carolina. We do practice statewide. But believe it or not, what I'm talking about today is a worldwide problem, definitely a nationwide problem. And very specifically a North Carolina problem. So we're going to be talking about vacant land fraud, seller impersonation fraud. What is the difference between vacant land fraud and seller impersonation fraud? What do those two things mean individually, right? So I first started teaching this class about vacant land fraud. And unfortunately, the fraudsters have gotten sophisticated enough, and us professionals have been lazy enough to, and not diligent enough, maybe, to allow this to grow into also seller impersonation fraud. So, really, vacant land fraud is seller impersonation fraud. But this fraud is happening now on properties that don't just include vacant land, it could include a vacant house. I've seen it, and I've seen it even used on an occupied house for a refinance where someone purported to be the person living in the house and they were refinancing their home, and the poor people actually in the house knew nothing about it. And they did not have a mortgage on their property. So this person was going to take a $200,000 mortgage out on the property, get $200,000 wired to themselves, and run. And these actual owners would have $200,000 lien on their property and would have to deal with that. And of course, it would be unpaid right away, and then foreclosure is going to start, and they're going to have to fight that, being that they never signed for a mortgage. So this is unfortunately expanding. You guys don't have to worry about so much about refinances. That's more for the lenders to worry about, and for myself. But uh, for sales and purchases, that is the majority of the time it's coming up. And it does come up more often on vacant land because vacant land more rarely has a mortgage against it. You don't need a door code to get inside vacant land, you know. It's less likely that neighbors are going to notice someone walking on the vacant land and think of it as a concern rather than if someone was circling around the house, you know. So there are a lot of reasons it often happens on vacant land. And for that reason, you should definitely be a little bit more aware when you have vacant land involved to be cognizant of this stuff. But really, guys, if it's a vacant home or if you've never met the seller and they're out of state and they're being really mysterious, um, you're going to want to think about these things. So, what is seller impersonation fraud? And again, that encompasses vacant land fraud. It's right there in the name, right? Someone's impersonating the actual owner of the property and they're trying to sell it. Owner impersonation fraud. I'm Bob Smith. Bob Smith showing on title is who owns this property. I'm Bob Smith. And the way it typically goes is they reach out to you guys and they say, "Wow, agent, your social media marketing is amazing. I saw one of your cards in the mail. Someone referred me to you and said you were the agent for me, and I can tell this is going to go well. And I have a piece of property I need to sell, and I need to unload it. I don't care if I take under market for it, and if you can get it sold for me quickly in a week or two or three, I'll even let you take a bigger commission on it. You can even offer the other side some commission. Everybody's going to get paid and it's going to be very happy. It's going to be super easy. No liens on the property. And, I'd love to get due diligence money wired to me, but if they don't even want to offer due diligence, that's fine. Whatever gets it closed fast. And if you could go ahead and get that listed for me, I've got 5 other properties. If this goes well, they're going to be yours. They're going to say everything they can to you to get you to pull that trigger and not think about what Zeno told you today. You're going to think back and say, man, it's not fun what Zeno's telling me. It's a lot more fun to think about all these listings and commissions I could get and all of that. But that's what they hope you do. And if that's not enough and you start to push back on them, then they're going to start to pull on your heartstrings and your soul. And these people are soulless, by the way, these fraudsters. They will start saying, well, I need this for a medical procedure. My mother's in the hospital. I'm in the hospital. I'm broke. I'm in dire straits. And you know what? Thank God for you. You're here to help me get out of this problem. And I pray for you every day because you're such an amazing person. You're doing something really good here. And that's what you and we all want to do really good things for our clients. So they're going to pull on those heartstrings if you start to push back. And I'll tell you some stories that shows you how far they can actually go on this because they don't want you asking questions. They want you to list and sell their property for them. They want you to list and sell someone else's property for them, actually. Um, so is there anyone in here that would be comfortable sharing sort of a quick story about something they've seen with vacant land fraud? I'm going to talk to you guys about some stats in the industry as to how prevalent it is, but I'm curious if anybody would have a quick story they wouldn't share. If not, I've got several.
We have a story.
So
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Uh, we have a story. We got a call at the office one day to to list some vacant land. And I said, Nikki said, who's sitting right here? Say hi, Nikki. She said, that sounds funny. Let's go drive over there. So the lot was about a mile, half a mile from our office or a mile from our office. We get over there and there's a house on that lot. So the fraudster didn't do a very good job of doing their due diligence because there was a house under
A brand new house.
brand new house, brand new $3 million house on that property. So, we blocked him, I think. Did we do it? Did we make fun of him or something? I'm not sure. We probably did.
Good. That's the least they deserve. What else do you, someone else had a story.
Yeah, so we've dealt with this probably like 4 times over this last year. Thankfully it's not gone too far, but the most recent one we just had this last week, our office listed a land, and then another agent who we do know reached out and they got a realtor.com lead for someone wanting to list that exact same parcel. And so she had reached out to me and was like, hey, I just wanted to confirm that your seller's real because we just got this, and the phone number didn't go back to anyone. So even it was a realtor.com lead she had received, and they wanted to list it, get on the market soon. We need to sell ASAP kind of thing. But I think our office has dealt with it 4 or 5 times this last year.
Yeah, it's growing, guys. Anyone else? I'll take another one if anybody has one. All right. So some stats for you guys. So we've heard 2 people talk about it, stories that they've experienced. The last speaker just said that he had seen it 4 or 5 times. So in 2023, guys, so 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, in October 2023, a company called Certified or Certif ID, however you want to do it. They capitalize the ID. It's a wire fraud insurance company that offers some services in that regard. They did a study nationwide of agents and asked them, how many of you guys have experienced owner impersonation fraud? This is almost 2 years ago. 54% of the agents they surveyed said they had heard about it happening to one of their colleagues. Or excuse me, 54% of the agents said they had experienced it themselves. 77% of the agents said they knew someone or had a colleague that it happened to, that had experienced it in some way. I can go ahead and tell you guys, those numbers are the ones they knew about. The fraud wouldn't be here if it wasn't working, unfortunately. So those numbers are high to begin with. Imagine the ones, they're really more than that as to how often it's happening. Now, I have updated this a bit because that is going on almost a couple of years ago. So I always try not, and by the way, I just checked before our class today on if there was anything new on this out in the world, on the internet and all that. So in September of last year, so not that long ago, the FBI put out a warning. And they unfortunately disclosed, this was on ABC News, that seller impersonation fraud is up 400% in the past 4 years. 400%. So unfortunately, we're going the wrong way on it. Or excuse me, I'm even wrong on that. 500%. Man, okay. It's up 500% in the past 4 years. So we're going the wrong direction on that. And let's be real. I'm an extreme ownership kind of guy. We're all, when someone defrauds us and gets involved in that, we're all victims. But guys, if it's not us that's going to help prevent this, who's going to? And I'm going to talk to you guys about potential liability that could come down the line on this as a reason we all got to take it seriously, even if it's not fair. Fraud's not fair to anyone. But if you're going to be an agent and you're going to be a real estate attorney and et cetera, you're probably going to have to start dealing with it more often because it's on the rise and due to the liability pieces I'm going to talk to you guys about. So when I first started teaching about this a couple of years ago, I reached out to the state bar and the North Carolina Real Estate Commission because I wanted to see how they felt about it. And first of all, I wanted to know what the bar had to say to me. If I find this, if I prevent it, what if I suffer from it? What's going to happen to me from the bar's point of view? I also asked the real estate commission if an agent goes through that, stops it, finds it, prevents it in the first place, experiences it, or suffers from it, are they going to be in trouble with the commission? What would you advise us to do to avoid it, to deal with it, all of that? Same thing to the bar. The bar basically told me nothing. The bar kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, if you notice it, you could report it to the authorities, but you don't have to. I'm like, what does that mean? So who do you want me to call if I see it? Well, the authorities. Really staying away from it all. Just blew my mind. The commission was a little more helpful, and they've probably been more helpful since then. This was a couple of years ago. They gave me a bulletin that they had posted that had about four or five little pro tips on how to avoid it, but mostly they were also similar. Do your best. You can call the authorities if you want. We don't really know. We don't really have an opinion on that yet. And I'll talk about their 4 or 5 tidbits and why at least half of them are no good, not very helpful. But and no offense to the commission, but it's just true, and I'll explain why. And so I'm like, well, goodness gracious, okay, how about this? E&O insurance, liability insurance, title insurance. Well, how are you guys dealing with this? Because I'm reading that it's on the rise, and I couldn't get much good answers from them. And I finally got a title insurance underwriting attorney to talk to me about this off the record. And she told me that it's her understanding and belief that the reason it's so hard to get anyone's direction on this is there is no direction on this. It's a new fraud, fairly new fraud, and it hasn't gone to court yet a lot. And that we really don't know who the state, our licensure boards, and the courts are going to hold liable and see at fault on this. And here's some of the reasons why. Let's say listing agent, you take that listing and Bob Smith scans you a copy of Bob Smith's ID and it has Bob Smith on it. You take that listing and list it for sale. Someone buys it. An attorney like me does a title search to see if Bob Smith owns that property, and Bob Smith does own that property. And your attorney sends a deed to the Bob Smith you're dealing with. Bob Smith sends me a signed, what appears to be a signed and notarized deed with Bob Smith signing it. Under the statute, I've got everything I need to close that thing. Who am I to say it's fraud, right? So the problem is this was happening before we ever knew it was happening. And a big problem with vacant land, on a house, you're going to find out pretty soon if something's gone wrong, probably. On vacant land, the owner of that vacant land may be in Florida, California. They may only remember that they own that vacant land when they go to pay the tax bill. And if they're busy, like we all are, they may not even notice that the tax bill doesn't come in the mail that year. And they may not think about it. Heck, I have clients that don't even pay their bills every year. It's so small, they're like, if they try to foreclose, I'll just pay it. I'll pay it once every 3 years or whatever. So they may not ever notice that something's happened to their vacant land. And in the meantime, your buyer may have built a house on it, property they don't own. And so, but the record seems to support they do. Okay, actual owner comes up out of the woodwork and says, whoa, who's building a house on my vacant land? And they're going to go to an attorney, and that attorney is going to tell them this: sue everyone. Sue the agents, sue the lawyers involved, sue the title insurance company, sue the lender, sue everyone. And guys, that's how litigation goes. If anyone's been lucky enough to enjoy litigation, especially if you are a licensed professional, you're probably going to get attached to that lawsuit, even if it's not fair. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how to avoid that happening, but also what to do and what you hope to have if it ever does happen. Well, because that hasn't happened enough, and because it's somewhat of a new fraud, and because it takes a while for these sellers to figure it out what happened, we're just now getting to the years where it's going to start hitting the fan, as it were. We're just now starting to get to the years where sellers are going to start finding this out, and they're going to start suing everyone. And we're going to find out, hopefully, a silver lining will hopefully be that the state, and the states across the nation, but the state of North Carolina is going to codify some sort of help for us all, and by statute. Here's, if you do this, you've done your job. hopefully our licensure boards will put out something. If you've done this, we're not going to see a need to punish you or whatever, discipline you. But we don't have any of that yet. The laws are way behind this. In my opinion, the licensure boards are way behind this. And a big reason is they're all wondering and pointing at everyone else, wondering what's going to happen with liability. Does that seller that was defrauded, they never knew this was happening, they weren't even involved in the transaction, do they get back the property? Do they get money? Who pays that money? Is it the realtor, the attorney, the new buyer? Well, the buyer already paid their money. The fraudster, by the way, guys, is gone. There's no arresting the fraudster and finding his piggy bank and getting that money back. The fraudster is likely not in the country. They're likely overseas. They may have what I call a mule, like a drug mule. They may have someone in the United States somewhere that will will print out a deed for us. They'll forge a signature and they'll forge a notary stamp. It's probably one person doing both. And then they'll send it back to us. From what I've seen and heard, we never find those people. When we find out it's fraud and we go after them, we call the authorities, as my state bar told me I could do if I wanted to. I've never, ever, ever heard of us finding someone and arresting them. Maybe it's happened, but I haven't heard about it happening yet. And my understanding is because the people that you're actually talking to probably are overseas, and whoever's and wherever they signed it, if they did sign it in the United States, that's not a permanent address for them, And Bob Smith doesn't exist. That was Frank Johnson is the fraudster, so they don't even know who to look for. So the fraudster is gone. And that means when the money's wired, and it almost does always ask to be wired, the money is gone. Because if you don't, wire fraud class is a whole other class that I should probably start teaching again. But it touches you guys a lot less because it's mostly to do with us lawyers. But if wires are gone more than 48 hours or so, you almost never get them back if it's fraud. They're out, the money's been sent out of the country by then. So you have a very small window to try to get the wires back, and it's not guaranteed. You have to get the FBI involved. They're the only ones that can say banks, get it back, wire it, you electronically get it back. Wires are otherwise cleared and gone. And a little aside to that, agents, if you're going to tell your buyers to wire due diligence money on any transaction, that's fine. Just be ready to come up with that money if it's fraud. Because once it's gone, it's gone. And by the time we figure out it's fraud, it's almost surely going to be 48 hours for something that early, like due diligence money. I have seen agents this past year on vacant land fraud tell their buyers, oh man, this is a great deal. We got to get this solidified. They just asked one thing from us. So it's a great price, not much earnest money. They asked one thing, that we wire the $5,000 due diligence money. Well, that fraudster doesn't care if it closes at all. Sure, they would have made more if it did, but they got $5,000. That's not a bad day's work. And that agent had to pay that $5,000 back to her buyer because that agent said, oh, it's fine to wire that due diligence money. In fact, we need to get this under contract. Don't do that unless you're willing to come up with it. Now, there are some cases where the seller or whatever, and you say, well, Zeno, I think I'm okay. I'm comfortable wiring that due diligence money. Let the buyer make that decision and tell the buyer that, it's pretty risky. I probably wouldn't do it. Be aware, yada, yada, get that in an email and then let the buyer make that decision. Sellers are wanting us to wire the due diligence money. I wouldn't recommend that for obvious reasons, but here are the specific reasons not to that you should be aware of. What do you want to do? Don't get caught advising them to do it, right? That's where she got in trouble. All right. So not a lot of directions from our licensure boards. We don't have a lot of cases yet. We don't have any state laws yet on this that I'm aware of. I've learned a little bit about North Carolina state law creation. And my understanding is they work on budget one year and they work on laws the next year. So you're only typically getting new laws every 2 years anyway. It's slow moving. Government's slow moving. I don't know that I think we're in a lawmaking year. I don't know that this is top of their mind right now, that means we're going to go 2 more years, guys, probably without having state law on this. What does that all mean? That all means we don't know when this all does hit the fan, and it will, and it's starting to, we don't know who the licensure boards and the courts are going to hold liable. But I promise you, they'll almost always sue everyone. And that's probably going to settle quite often. And when it settles, we don't get any case law from the courts until it actually goes to trial. And so I promise you guys, you don't want to be involved in a lawsuit. But if you are going to be involved in a lawsuit, I'm going to give you some things you're going to want to have in hand so that you can show, hey, look, what else do you want me to do here, right? And that was what this title insurance provider attorney told me, that look, I think they're all scared because they don't really know, and they don't want to give bad advice, and they don't want to say, Zeno, you're not going to be liable when I might be, according to the state and the courts. The bar doesn't want to get in between that. So I think we all have to assume, guys, right now that we could be liable in these situations. So we have to be careful with that, right? All right. So I'm going to tell you guys a story about a transaction we found to be fraudulent, and how we stopped it. And thank God we tried. So I had a brand new file come in, and by brand new file, I guess I really mean new realtors, a chance for our firm to shine with them, maybe a new source of business for us. I was really excited to get it. It was a rush deal. We could knock it out quickly because these things are often rush deals. And I'm like, okay, guys, happy to help. Let's go. And I was excited to meet these two new realtors. Wanted to make a really great impression, help them get their commissions, help their clients get their transaction done. So we dive in. Okay. And we all in our office, anytime it's vacant land or we see any kind of little red flag that it could be fraud, we ask seller, attorney, if there is one, or listing agent, can you vouch for the identity of these sellers? Is it the actual owner? Do you know them? Is it your uncle? Is it your best friend? Have you met with them? Have you had a listing presentation with them? Or did they contact you off the internet? You've never met them, you barely know them. And here's why we ask. And if we can help you vet this person, let us know. There's a whole spiel we send out to try to prevent this sort of thing. And she says, you know what? I haven't met them. They reached out to me and asked me to if I could list their property for them. And, he's has some medical procedures that being done, and he could use the money. So he's trying to unload this fake land. Exactly what I told you that they like to do. Right. And I'm like, oh boy, this is probably fraud. So, but you never know. So we're going to vet it, right? Make sure. And it's awkward because you don't want to go to your seller client and be like, you're a fraudster criminal, and they may not be, right? So you have to be tactful with it in case they're legitimate. So she doesn't know, so I'm going to help her out with it. So I reach out to the seller and I ask him for certain things. Guys, he sent me over the prettiest front and back North Carolina driver's license I've ever seen. A scan. It had the tax bill, had an address. This was vacant land, so it had a different address than the property. It had even that address on it. This person had gotten a fake ID and had the tax bill address put on it. It looked beautiful. It was in color. It was clear. Completely fake. So anyone who tells you to rely on scans of IDs, toss it out the window. Terrible advice. IDs. North Carolina's done a lot, by the way. If you've gotten an ID recently, Venus just got one. They've done a lot to try to prevent fake IDs, but it only really helps you if you got it in hand. If you got a scan of it, you can't tell if it's got the clear things and the holograms and all that. So beautiful ID. I'm like, all right, well, they kind of say that might be him then. And I'm like, okay, and I'm kind of making him jump through a few more hoops. Do you have some documents when you purchased, that sort of thing? And I'll go over that again in a second. In the meantime, the listing agent really got spooked, and she should have. And she just went to work on this thing, and good for her. She said, you know what? I know the house across the street, the person has the same last name. I bet they're related to this person. I'm just going to go knock on the door and ask. I'm like, go crazy. This was all happening the same day. So she goes and does that, random person across the street. And she goes, do you know Bob Smith? Bob Smith's, by the way, my generic client name. If anyone's here named Bob Smith, that's not who I'm talking about. But do you know Bob Smith? He says, yes, that's my brother. And by the way, he lives right down the street here. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, he had asked me to list his property. So I hadn't met him yet. So I'm just trying to confirm for his safety that it's, his property and everything. And and the brother says, well, that's odd. I didn't know he was selling his property. And She goes, well, he's trying to get that medical procedure done. He's got cancer. And he's up in Virginia trying to get a medical procedure done. And the brother says, well, I don't know if he's trying to sell his property. And I didn't know he had cancer, but he's in his house right now. You can go talk to him. So first of all, she's like, oh gosh, I hope I haven't just disclosed to his brother that he had cancer, all this, weird, awkward dynamics, right? She goes down the street, meets with the real Bob Smith, who says, no, thank God I don't have cancer. I'm not selling that property. I inherited it. And frankly, in my vernacular was very old man about it. I'm not selling it. I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone, kind of. So I get that information from her. So I really start to push harder on this fraudster. And I just say, for my version of Bob Smith, Bob, there's a man in your house purporting to be you. Do we need to call the police? And I was kind of joking because at that point, we're pretty convinced it's fraud. I mean, if he says anything other than, yes, please call the police, it's fraud. And that's when you'll start seeing these fraudsters completely dodge a very legitimate question and just say, Zeno, I need this closed right now. I'm dying of cancer. And I thought this would already be closed by now. I can't believe you're asking me these questions. I'm in pain, just going sort of irrational. And they'll start tugging on your heartstrings. And it will make you be like, gosh, I hope I'm not causing this person pain. I hope I'm not causing myself liability with a real owner. My buyers wanting to buy this property, they're not happy about hearing about this kind of things. Why are you holding this up? But they completely go off the rails. They'll get angry unreasonably, just randomly. They'll get impatient. They will start throwing random paper. He sent me a notary's E&O insurance policy, which I've never actually seen before. And of course, it was all fake, right? And it ended up being all fraud. And so I let the buyer know, and we did not close, but they were happy. They were obviously, thank you for catching this, yada, yada. Sadly, I didn't get paid. Realtors didn't get paid. And that's the crappy thing about this. But that is why it's so important to avoid it on the front end, which I'm going to talk about. You can avoid some wasted time, if nothing else, guys. Even if none of us are found to be liable for this stuff, you don't have that much time to waste on these things. But we probably will be liable in some way. So we caught that, got rid of it. But they get nasty, and they will do really nasty things to try to convince you to hurry up and stop asking questions. And they'll get mad at you if you push back at all. The silver lining is, I didn't have to do this for days with this guy. After you push back a few times, they'll move on and disappear. You got to understand, these fraudsters are doing 100 of these across the nation at a time. They're looking for low-hanging fruit. They're hoping you'll be the low-hanging fruit. And I know that sounds abrasive and accusation, but guys, I'm telling you, if nothing else, use your pride to avoid this. You don't want to be the dummy, the low-hanging fruit that disregards this and doesn't do your part. Now, I'm also not judging you. Up until the past 2 or 3 years, you heard me tell you, if I got a signed deed, that's what the statute says. That's how I've been practicing law for 15 years. Who am I to say it's fraud? I would never even think that it was fraud, especially if another attorney was involved. So I would have closed that. And it's possible 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I closed on vacant land that wasn't being actually sold by the owner because I got a deed from the record owner. And who knew? Who knows? So we weren't checking that. So it's very possible I've been involved in it. All we can do is going forward, try to avoid it and make sure if it does happen that we've done our part. So to that end, I've created it's called Zeno's best practices because guys, I've asked for it and not gotten any from anybody else. So they're imperfect. They are ever changing. But it's the best I've got, and it's what my staff follows. And so there are several things you can do to try to avoid this stuff. I've got this set out. This is what it looks like. I'm going to talk about how to get this in a minute, but it looks beefy, I know. But it's a 1-page PDF, and I've got it split out from best practices for buyers agents, best practices for listing agents, and some general red flags to watch out for. Here I'm going to go over some of them, and I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions here in a bit. So buyers agents, if you're putting in an offer on vacant land or a vacant house, how long does it take you to reach out to the listing agent, text or email them and say, have you thought about this? Do you actually know the owner? You know, I saw a video one time about an attorney telling me to look into this. So I'm just asking. You know, if the listing agent says, I've never met the owner, maybe you're going to save their career, their liability by saying, why don't we look at these best practices Zeno sent over? Have you thought about looking at this? Or text or call me for goodness sakes. But you could probably get ahead of putting in an offer and going through all of this and finding out it's fraud after the fact by simply asking the listing agent that up front. Um, Listing agents, same thing. If you get a call to list vacant land or unoccupied property or something like that, and you're not meeting with this, you didn't go get this listing, they came to you. I know that's what we all want, but sometimes you got to go out and get them. If they come into you, doesn't mean it's fraud. You've done your marketing, you've done a great job earning that referral. But if it's coming directly to you and you know, okay, cool. It's a pink flag, right? Not a red one, maybe. But if they then say, I can't jump on a video call, I can't Zoom with you, I can take a phone call, and I can email, but I can't get there. I'm in California, and by the way, I'm not feeling well this week, so can you go ahead and get it listed, and we'll talk next week. I will get on a phone call. I'll even get on a video call with you, but let's do it next week. They'll put things off like that, and it continues that way. And if you push back, they get angry. Well, it sounds like you don't want this listing. If any seller tells you that, you don't want the listing. That's my opinion. If they tell you you don't want the listing, they're probably right. So be careful with that. You know, if it seems sketchy, raise that red flag and go through these best practices to confirm who they say they are. Guys, best way to find out, in my opinion, if a seller is who they say they are, ask them for copies of documents when they bought the property. Now, again, not having those isn't determinative. It's not for certain that they're a fraudster, but if they have a copy of something that's not recorded, like their title insurance policy or their settlement statement from when they bought it, stuff like that, it's probably not a fraudster. That's not something a fraudster would generally have. Heck, most owners who buy property don't keep that crap, right? So if they don't have it, it's probably, if they do have it, it's probably really them. Um, bottom line. Bottom line though, hear me when I say this, guys. Stop what you're doing and listen up. You don't have to take on this liability. The attorneys you're using and referring work to ought to offer this to you. They ought to offer to you to help vet a client if it comes up. They ought to do it on the closings they're doing. They ought to do it for you listing agents. And then you don't have that liability at all because you can point to the attorney and say they were able to get to that point. They were able to vouch. And if you don't have an attorney that will do that for you, or you just want a better one, you can call or text me, and I'm going to talk more about that in a few minutes. But you're going to have these best practices. You can obviously go through them yourselves. Why bother? Why try to remember all this when you can simply text or call an attorney and have them do it for you, and also hand that liability off to a law officer instead of yourselves and your family, right? So pretty big no-brainer there. I get calls all the time, texts all the time from agents wanting me to help them vet clients, and help prevent some of this fraud. Now, you may not need me. Maybe they convince you that it's fraud real quick, and that's great. But just keep that in mind. If you're going to take it on, you might want to have an agent, or excuse me, an attorney help you vet that client to make sure they are who they say they are. So you can, Venus put my cell phone number and email in the chat. If you want a copy of these best practices, text me or email me. I will shoot you over a copy of this. I will also give you guys, there is a free program with most of the counties in North Carolina where you can sign up for property notices. Now, what this means, if Bob Smith signs up for a property notice in, Mecklenburg County, that means that if anything with Bob Smith's name gets recorded, anything, Mecklenburg County will text and email Bob and say, by the way, Bob, something with your name just got recorded. Here's what it is. Check it out if you want to. Now, people say, Zeno, well, the deed's already recorded at that point. That doesn't help us stop something. Yeah, but guys, if you're going to catch this, let's see. I guess I'll allow this. If you're going to catch this, you want to catch it the next day, right? You don't want to catch it years down the road. when you're at the beach and someone at your agency says, we just got served with notice of papers from that closing you had. Apparently the seller never owned it. So let's catch it the next day. We can jump on it. There are things we can absolutely do, like prevent a new buyer from building a house there, maybe get the money back, that sort of thing. But those property notices can really help. So I have an alphabetized, clickable link list for each county for those property notices where you can sign up and you can share those to your clients. Guys, I'm here to tell you, you are out there pitching your value every day. If this doesn't make you more valuable to potential buyers, especially of vacant land, I don't know what would. So having this stuff on hand is going to help you sell yourself as well. So text or email me. I will send you this best practices and the alphabetized list. And also, frankly, you'll have my contact information in case you would like to text or call me about helping to vet a client, I've had buyer's agents call me and say, we're putting in an offer. I'm not real comfortable with this. And what I tell them is, well, if you're going to put in that offer, send it to me. I'm going to vet the seller as part of my closing process anyway. And then the liability's off of you. So keep that in mind. And then, guys, a little bit about me, and then I'll take questions. You sat through the class, so give me 2 minutes to tell you about the firm. I saw someone ask about the email and cell. Venus, would you be able to type that in the chat again for me? Guys, by the way, my phone number is all over the internet, my cell phone number. So it will take you 30 seconds to find me on Facebook, Instagram, Google, that sort of thing. And you can get my phone number that way. But I'll have Venus put it back in the chat as well. And I'll make sure before we jump off. So a little bit about me. Again, my name's Zeno Lancaster. We have a statewide real estate closing practice. We also do estate planning, estate administration, and business consults. Our top selling product across the state is a product no one else has. It's a come to you closing. It's not just that we send someone to the client. We do it whenever, wherever they want, before 9, after 5 on the weekends. We can always record and disperse same business day. We can do that in all 100 counties. We send a video talking about their documents they're going to sign and a PDF explaining it. We send someone full service with the docs. They sit with them, get their notaries, send it back to us, and we record and disperse same day. We wire commissions, we wire proceeds. There is nothing that's offered out there that I know of that we don't offer, except we offer much more than that as well. So keep that in mind. Clients love it. Agents love it. A lot of times they want to sign in their agency office. It helps with their branding and they don't want to have to drive across town or deal with stuff. They get time back. Clients really love it. There are not many clients out there that are going to say, if you tell them we can come directly to you, it's very low bandwidth on your end and it doesn't cost anything, guys. In most scenarios, there's no extra charge to the client. It's all value. And again, I'll say this one more time. I like trying to share value with agents that work with me, because it also makes them more valuable because they can share that value with the clients. So when they go talk to a buyer or a seller about what makes them different, they can say, I've got an attorney I can text or call nights and weekends with questions, addendums. They'll vet fraud for us. They can also come to you in the mornings and after you get off of work, on the weekends, whatever you need. Most agents aren't able to say that. Most agents aren't able to text me in front of their clients and get a response. So that's going to make you guys more valuable as well, and hopefully make you get more clients, which is what we're all trying to do. So please text or call me anytime I can help with any questions about this or anything else. I think you'll appreciate what we have to offer. We do free addendums for people to help. I could talk for a while on this. So text or call me and I'll give you the spiel. I have a video I'll send you, so you don't even have to talk to me. I'll send you a video about what we offer. You can watch it in your own time, and it goes over everything we offer on top of what our competitors offer. So I think you'll enjoy that. So we also have a video you can send to your clients that explains to them, here's what a survey is. Here's why you may not need it. So don't stress too much if we don't have time or money for it. Here's why you might want to get it. And it takes that liability off of you. Again, why would you take on that liability when you can let an attorney do it? So it helps them make that informed decision on surveys. So we've got all that sort of thing. I do classes as you're experiencing. We have a Facebook group. So if you'd like to get included in that Facebook group, again, text or email me and I can send you an invite to that. Looks like Venus added in the cell phone number and email address. So you've got that there. Jeremiah said the mobile closing is extremely helpful. Jeremiah, appreciate it. We've closed lots of closings with Jeremiah, so he's experienced this process. That's a great thing to point up. So Jeremiah, thank you for that. If you guys need references, I have them all over the state. We're the preferred attorney for several agencies from Asheville to Wilmington. So would love to share information about that with you. So I'd love to just meet you and chat with you. So if nothing else, you'll have me in your cell phone number, in your cell phone saved. If a month from now your go-to can't answer your question, you're going to have someone who can. But we would certainly love to work with you guys. Now, any questions about vacant land fraud, seller impersonation fraud, our services, anything like that that I can take? Or did I just nail it all? You guys don't have any questions at all? If you don't, that's great.
I guess,
let's
for me, working, because I work a lot on the listing side, and I've seen a lot of them the last 3 or so this last year where they reached out, but they were very much need this done in a fast manner. I don't really care what you list it for, but I did go away from it going, what do I need to do? Who do I need to notify to make sure of this? So the one thing we did do is start sending out information to the tax billing address, just putting that address on notice. But I don't know, like, because I was like, whoa, what's the liability if you list this and all of a sudden it closes? Oh, risky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, guys, I there are so many ways, and I never want to sound condescending or abrasive about this, but I'm not an agent, and I know I can't understand all of the nuances that go in. I know you have clients pushing you to hurry and stuff like that, but what I'm trying to say is the liability agents take on that they don't need to take on. It always kind of amazes me, and especially when you have someone. And I know this sounds like a selfish pitch or whatever, but when you have someone like me saying, "I will take it on and do this for you," why not use that? So that's what I would throw out there. Is I see it way too often where agents, most of the stories I tell, they didn't get attorneys involved, and or that I hear from agents is, I didn't even ask. My goodness gracious, ask. You should, if you're sending work to an attorney. In my opinion, they owe you that partnership where they can help you get more under contract, but they can also help you stay out of trouble. If we get in trouble and we're doing the closing together, we're going to be in it together. So let's teamwork and make sure that we're not bringing that liability on. I've got a couple of questions, several in the chat. Let's see. Is there a way to verify IDs? I think it depends on where the ID is coming from, what the ID is. Different states have different methods on that. Certainly, state by state, we can look into that, and there may be. What I would say, Melissa, is that my ways of verifying a client are almost easier. You probably can in some states somehow verify their ID. I can usually get to whether I think they're a fraudster with pretty good certainty even without that. Just by asking questions. If you guys have a piece of vacant land and there's a huge oak tree right in the middle of it, and you ask, or especially if there's not, and you ask the client if we can cut that down, the buyers are interested, and they say, yeah, cut that thing down, I hate it. Well, then that's not their vacant land. So let's see. Thank you, Jeremiah. Jeremiah says he had spent an hour and a half with me on the phone on a Saturday, but we got it done. So I appreciate that, Jeremiah. Let's see. Tim said he'll email me.
Hey, Zeno.
Yeah.
Hey, my students always start with the phrase, "This may be a dumb question," so I'm going to start with the same thing. But I was just curious. I mean, do the people who are defrauded, do they get their property back?
We don't know yet. So it's a problem because how do you take in North Carolina, especially if you're a bona fide purchaser, you're supposed to have rights in the property
I
that you
know.
bought.
I know.
Because
So
yeah,
if somebody records a deed over your deed, can is they don't get the property back? There's no avenue for them to quit claim or lawsuit, or I mean it seems like it wouldn't be adverse possession because they already own it, but um
Yeah.
That's one of the questions I've got is, did the original owner ever get the property back?
Well, yeah, that's a more complex question, and it's not a dumb one. That's a complex question because let's look at it from adverse possession. If you get a deed for property, it shortens the window on adverse
I
possession.
know,
So yeah,
7 years.
yeah. So if you own it for that long and no one notices, you could quit claim it to yourself and argue that, as long as you could meet the other elements of the
Yeah.
adverse possession, which is, by the way, difficult to do in North Carolina, but it's possible. The truth of the matter is, it's hard to take property away from a buyer, but the seller was victimized. So what do we do? And property is unique. So giving them money may not be the same thing as in their minds as giving them the property back. So we don't know yet. We haven't seen this come, as far as I've seen, we haven't seen this come through the courts yet or come down the statutes in a way that makes sense. We have statutes, some of which somewhat address this stuff, but they don't make sense when you apply it to this situation. So we've really got to see what's actually going to happen, because I can't wrap my mind around how everyone's going to be made whole. Someone's going to be out money, and that money has to come from somewhere. And who's it going to come from? That's kind of the simple way I see it. Are they going to take property away from a buyer or seller? We don't know yet. But whoever they take it away from is going to be owed money. So who's going to have to pay that? Is kind of or are they just going to say you got defrauded, sucks for you? Which is probably not the way they're going to go with it. What I think's probably going to happen, because the masses are more they want the masses happy more than they want you and me happy, us licensed professionals. So they're probably going to blame us. That's where I think it'll go. I could be wrong. They're probably going to say, Zeno, you were their lawyer. You should have thought about this and protected them. Agent, you're licensed to do real estate. You should have thought about this. I don't know. I could be wrong. And look, I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's where they're going to go.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around the fact that you could legally lose your land because somebody stole it and you have no redress.
Yeah, and you might, but see they may be able to go into court and say this was fraud, and the judge says, you know what, you're right. I'm giving you that property back. But if you do that, you're technically taking away property from a buyer without due process, which you can't do. It's a constitutional problem. So it's going to be a mess. And it just hasn't really come down the line enough yet. But I promise you, when it does, you guys mark my words, God be with us, we're all going to be involved with it. If it was something we were playing part of. I mean, I'd be shocked if the attorney they hire to handle this isn't going to just tag everyone in and see what happens. Usually that's how a lawsuit goes. Tag everyone in, throw it against the wall, and see what sticks. So we'll see how it goes. So guys, if that ever does happen, you're going to be following these best practices, and you're going to show up and you're going to say, I did X, Y, and Z. What else would you have me do? Especially if it's the real estate commission or the bar. I know I'm going to be walking into the bar and being like, I teach classes on this. I've done everything you said to do, which was nothing. I'm doing more than most people. What would you have had me done? And that's at least a decent place to start. I got a question. Do I see buyer fraud? It's funny. I think in 15 years of practice, I've seen 2 buyers disappear at closing. One of them just kept drawing it out with no end in sight, and one of them just disappeared. They've got to come up with money, and if the seller gets their money, who cares? So usually that's not really happening. I've seen a couple of buyers disappear off the face of the earth, it seemed like, but that's about all I've seen. Now they will try to. I've seen they might try to defraud their lender or something, but that's of course different. About their financials. Melissa said, heard about a situation with another firm who had sellers in Texas, and they submitted fake licenses to the listing agent. Listing agent did all they could to get the agreement signed and collect IDs. Turns out in the end that it was 2 women who owned the property, and the licenses they sent in was of a man and a woman. That was how they found out. Later, it was not the real sellers. E&O excludes coverage on this, too, is what Nancy says. So, of course, talk to your E&O providers. I suggest you do that anytime something like this comes up, and to get ahead of it. But that's important to know. E&O is washing its hands of it. I can tell you title insurance is washing their hands of it too. That's what this attorney told me. And by the way, before I forget, Call It Closed Title is also sponsoring this class. So I think I forgot to mention that at the top. So they do great work. Wanted to make sure I mentioned Call It Closed Title. We work with them quite often, and several others. So thank you for offering this class. You're very welcome. One of the ways, Melissa goes on, one of the ways I verified the real seller I'm speaking with is by doing the reverse, I think she meant, phone number search. And the Forewarn app. The Forewarn app is an excellent resource for you guys. It's an easy way to confirm things and, and check. Absolutely. And Melissa should do that, and then she should, and she does, by the way. I get to work with Melissa a lot, so I appreciate you, Melissa. She can also say, I've done my Forewarn search and this looks good, but I want Zeno to sign off on it. And she has that ability. So that's something to keep in mind, even if you're very happy, and you should do your own research on this stuff before you even waste your time having conversations with these people. But certainly tag me in if I can help you guys with that. Yeah, Forewarn's great, guys. Frankly, you should be looking up your clients on Forewarn anyway, because they could be who they say they are and still be terrible. So be safe out there. You might be dealing with someone who is absolutely who they say they are, and you don't want to know them. So Forewarn's a good app to have. Any other questions, guys? Of course, you'll always have direct access to me with that cell phone and email. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. So like you're dealing with people who are buying, fixing things up and selling them. Supposing they bought one from an agent and they got it that way and it was a fraud, shouldn't buy, and then they come to you to list it. Would you, obviously you're going to do your title search, but if you don't find it right away, would you be on the hook for that also? Because it'd be down the road.
So if you're saying a transaction happened that was fraud, and then that new owner who's real doesn't know any better selling it again.
Yeah, because they decide to like fix it and sell it if it's.
Yeah, and we're going to start seeing that too, guys. And I think in that instance, title insurance is going to be involved with it. But keep in mind, this is another class that's far less interesting to people. Trust me, I've tried. On title insurance, you're only insured up to the value of the loss. So if that property were to lose market value, or if you got a vacant land, 50K, that's what you bought it for, and you build a house on it, you're only insured up to 50K. So title insurance isn't always what you think it is. And also, I'll just say this one more time, and I know no one's going to get surveys. No one gets surveys, but every title insurance policy you guys get has a big blanket exception in there that says if anything would be disclosed by a new survey of the property, don't expect us to insure it. So that's just a little side pro tip on title insurance, but it's not what you think it is always. But yeah, I think the purchaser of that property, the owner, in that instance, I feel like they would probably actually get to keep it because it's that far removed and there's title insurance involved and that kind of thing. And but who knows? We're still not there yet, So this is all a guess as to how it's going to go. I'm erring on the side of caution as if we're all going to be in trouble and involved, so that we can show we jump through these hoops. First of all, we either avoid it to begin with, or we show we jump through these hoops. What else would you have us do? But the idea, hopefully, is that we avoid it to begin with. And I'm telling you, it's going to take all of this class is how we do it. It's going to take all of us to do it because it is not on the downside. It is on the rise. It's not on the downtrend. So unfortunately, fraudsters are factually and statistically finding that attorneys and realtors are not taking this seriously because it is 500% rise in the past 4 years. So they are expecting you not to take it seriously. They're expecting you to use a lawyer that doesn't ask questions. And they're thriving in that world right now, unfortunately.
And that real quick, that's what I found on the one that we had, where just asking a simple question of, do you know how much the HOA was? And he's like, what's an HOA? I was like, well, you've owned this property for 12 years, right? So this has been great. Thanks for putting this on. Awesome.
Of course. And yeah, again, these fraudsters are probably overseas. The very simplest of sort of prodding questions can find out a lot. And you can even, if you want to be tactful and you don't want to, have awkward conversations up front without having to, you can make a checklist that seems simple enough to answer and reasonable enough to answer, like what's the HOA information. And, if they go, just like in that example, if they say, I don't understand any of this, it's maybe a little red flag to check out. Nancy says, how do they open bank accounts with a fake ID? Nancy, I don't know that. If we have any bankers online, let me know. But in my experience on earth, if you've got money in hand and you need to deposit it into a bank, the banks don't ask all the questions to take the money. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know. Maybe the fake IDs are just that good. I don't really know that. That's a great question. But criminals get bank accounts, you know. So I don't know. Maybe they used. Keep in mind, maybe they used a fine correct ID of someone. Maybe it's, you know, their fraudster mule, Bob's cousin, you know, and they open a fine account with a perfectly fine ID, and that's where this fraudster sends the money, and they try to shoot it out to Russia, or not to pick on Russia, wherever it's going, before anyone can be all the wiser. And the cousin's flown to, you know, he's flown to Russia or wherever too, you know. So I'm guessing at that. That's a good question. I don't know. But all I know is they're not having a problem with that, right? Because again, it's on the rise. Sure would be nice if banks would help us avoid this too, though. Because they're almost always asking for wires, so it's not as if we're writing a check, and you know, checks are a lot more easily reversed than a wire transfer would be. All right, any other questions, guys? So I appreciate you guys coming. You've got my email and text. Text me or email me for the best practices, the itemized or the alphabetized county clickable property notice links. And please just say hello and let's connect. And of course, if you have any other questions about working with us, I sure would love to chat with you guys about it. Really appreciate everyone coming. Thanks again, Venus, for moderating. Thanks again, Call It Closed Title, for sponsoring this class. And be safe out there, guys. I appreciate you. We'll talk soon.